Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we'll chat with Justina Nguyen. I met Justina on a random Tuesday night just before Thanksgiving. I was bartending that night and she had just DJ'd next door at the venue Lincoln Hall. And we just got to talking and connected. She hooked up her mixer to our system and we just had a blast till close. She's full of positive vibes and I really appreciate her. You can follow her at Soup's Bass. For this conversation, we met up at East Hill Tea Company in Wicker Park. And what's remarkable, among other things, is the music that was playing in the background. It spoke to me. It's the Beatles, but only the Rubber Soul and Revolver albums. People usually think of the early Beatles or the late Beatles, but rarely the middle. And the middle is the becoming, the evolution. When I used to be an Uber driver in the city, I'd play these two albums on dreary, rainy, or snowy mornings. It's cozy and reflective. And when Justina and I met, it was cold and snowing outside. So it was really cool to have this playing in the background. So without further ado, let's begin. All right, so we're here with Justina, and we're at the East Hill Tea Company. How would you describe our experience here so far?
Very ceremonial, I would expect. I think what we've just experienced here is this whole education on the way that the tea has been made and the type of glassware or clayware that the tea comes in, how it's poured, these little animals that we have that you pour water onto to open.
And yours is a puppy.
Mine's a puppy because it looks really playful and so cute.
Mine's an elephant.
Yeah. Because
I'm feeling wise right now. I did some reading earlier today, and now I'm...
Soup cerebral.
Cerebral would be a better term, yes.
And I got a green tea, a Dragon Well, I think it's called.
Yeah, I have a black tea that's much harder to pronounce for myself. So, Justina, how long have you lived in Chicago for?
Oh, man. I moved here in the summer of 2008, so that'll be coming up on 12 years.
Okay.
It's a long damn time.
Yeah.
Right after college.
What brought you here?
So it was basically right after I moved here right after college. So the last 2 years, my junior and senior year, I went to the University of Texas in Austin, and I needed some extra income, so I decided to take up an internship. So I went on the university, I guess, school job platform, and this woman who had a company called Sporty K9, like the letter K and the number 9. Okay. She was a Wall Street, success, but then she wanted to start her own business. And so she moved to Austin with her 2 poodles and wanted to start this company that made sporting license apparel for dogs. So you can think about jackets, collars, leashes, caps, but they're all like MLB license or NBA license. So like all the different sports, right? Okay. So I started off doing, I was an admin assistant basically. So I was doing like accounting and some quality control and things like that, working out of her condo in the northwest side of Austin. So I would drive like every day over there and like hang out with her and her dogs and just work. And then my senior year, I chose to stick around for another semester, even though I could have graduated early. But in doing so, I was able to travel a bit for this job. So I worked my way up and started designing when we got new teams and new royalties. So did that and traveled all over the country for various trade shows and conferences centered around sports and pets. Okay. So you can imagine like pet conferences are like kind of crazy. And this is like, even though it's like right before the recession hit, like people are spending tons of money on their pets.
I can believe that.
Yeah, totally. And Chicago was one of the cities I came to. I'd never been. I've taken a lot of vacations as a kid all over the country with my parents growing up, but Chicago was just never a city that we went to. And I had my heart set on New York after college, but when I came here, I went to a conference in the Rosemont Convention Center.
Sure.
And I met some people there, and some of them had lived in Wicker Park, and so when I kind of explored the area, it reminded me of Austin a bit.
Really?
Yeah, it did at the time, because Wicker Park has changed a lot. But I knew the moment I wanted to move here was towards the end of the trip. I took the Blue Line by myself downtown, and this is, granted, at this time I'm like 21, and I've never traveled alone anywhere, and I was traveling all over the place by myself, so it was a period of time where I was really coming to myself and really understanding the power of being an adult and being a woman, being an independent, and it was quite an adventure. But I remember taking the train to, I think I got off at like Clark and Lake, or maybe it was like Madison or Monroe, and I walked up the stairs, and then in just the whole city at night, like surrounding me, and I started crying because it was so beautiful. Wow. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And so I lied to my parents after when I graduated, and said, hey, I got a job in Chicago. But I had like 3 interviews lined up, and luckily I landed one of them.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow. So what neighborhood are you in now?
I'm in Wicker Park, which is where we're at right now. And I've been here the entire time. I've kind of bounced around different parts of Wicker Park. Okay. So I've lived like kind of like in sort of like Ukrainian Village, Westtown area. Although technically Westtown is this entire area that encompasses like Ukrainian Village and Wicker Park. But what I had learned is that through the gentrification of things, the real estate industry is really big in changing the names of places in order to make them more profitable and more
more
glamorous.
marketable.
Exactly, marketable. And so they tend to like put the name park or village at the end of it. So that's why a lot of these little areas you see. And so Wicker Park, when people say Westtown, it's just really encompassing all this area. But Wicker, but it's more glamorous. And so you think about the gentrification of things and real estate moving in and people with higher income. It's part of the whole process. It's kind of crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the difference between when you moved to Wicker Park originally to where it is now?
Man, well, when I moved here, it was already going through gentrification, but there was still like seedy areas, and
sure.
It's still, I felt it was a much more mixed crowd and it's more diverse, but over the last 12 years, it's almost like re-gentrified. And now I don't even recognize it anymore. It's some of the places that were staples, like Double Door, are gone. A lot of the businesses that unfortunately have been around for many, many years have been pushed out because either larger hospitality groups have moved in, or larger businesses like retail. Although a lot of the retail stores don't even last that long here either. Yeah. Just like kind of huge turnover. So I would say like, I used to go out a lot in Wicker Park, and now I can say that I really don't that much anymore, at least at night. Okay. The night, I'll have my occasional, run-ins with Estelle's at 3 a.m. after a gig or something like that, and it's still there, and it's still a staple of the area. But you can even tell, the crowd has changed, and just the feeling and the vibes have changed a bit, and it's kind of lost its, artfulness that it used to have when I first moved here. What the original reason why I actually fell in love with the area. So.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So on an open Saturday, how would you choose to spend it?
Well, lately it's been horizontal at home with my cat, my cat Clarice. But it's only because I do so much. I have a full-time job, but I also have 6 or 7 side hustles, and so any time for myself is something that I fight for. And if I have an open time in the weekend, that's what I spend doing. But if I wasn't horizontal with my cat, I would be in the warmer weather. I'd be riding around the city in my Pook, my motorbike. I would be spending time with close friends because I don't get to see them, beyond sometimes them coming out to my gigs, or there's some sort of, obligation I may have to be involved in. And then otherwise it's traveling. So I travel a bit for work and for play. And so usually I'll extend, if it's a work trip during the week, I'll extend it into the weekends and, be able to explore and spend some downtime. Yeah.
That's cool. You mentioned side hustles. What's your favorite one of them?
Oh my God. Well,
that you have.
So I think, a lot of them kind of start blending in together, but my favorite side hustle is my DJing, because for me it's how I release. It's like my creative cathartic release. And it's also a way to connect with people without having to talk to them. You know,
Sure,
it's this idea of like shared humanity where you're connecting with people on a level, even with people you may not ever really talk, you know, would normally not approach to have a conversation or whatever. But it's this nice feeling, and it gives this good energy for me, like kind of recharges me, but also depletes me at the same time. But it's my favorite. I think for myself and also for others. But and then my other side hustles are usually some sort of community involvement or community uplifting. So various organizations like I just joined an organization called Peach Presents, which is an LGBTQ like experience agency. So they throw different events around the city and give a platform and a voice to queer women and femme.
Okay.
And then I have at work an incubator that is a cultural currency generator. Basically, we make brands relevant, or we help make brands relevant to culture in an authentic and a legitimate way. And then there's another group that I'm a part of called Mob Rep that's similar. We throw cultural events around the city for brands and also not for brands. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of a lot of things have a lot of crossover.
Right.
So it feels like what I do with my work is what I do with my side hustling. So yeah.
It's like applying knowledge in all these different spaces, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And doing it and it's like we're all kind of intentionally trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But there are nuances in each of these groups. You know, everyone has a different agenda slightly, and it's kind of helping them grow in that field, you know. But also seeing those crossovers, and if it makes sense, a chance to collaborate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you think of Chicago, what colors do you imagine first?
So I think currently it's gray because I feel like we've got no sun in the winter.
Yeah.
You know, the snow on the ground when it's there on end for days, it's like turns gray and mucky, right? But normally, I guess out of this winter funk, it would be blue because of the river and the lake, and also the Chicago flag. And it just has like the way that the water reflects off a lot of the buildings has this kind of like bluish hue to it. So.
What's your proudest moment as a Chicagoan? You've been here 12 years now.
When I survive every single winter. I'm like, how did I do that? I'm moving. Yeah. But I somehow am still here. I think what my proudest moment, I guess, here is in the last couple of years, it's being part of this continued bigger movement of really highlighting Chicago culture and really supporting the communities here, whether they're marginalized, whether not. I think we're in an interesting social and political climate that has really banded people together, and you start seeing this rise of so many different groups coming out, so they, you know, to have a voice and to create and feel empowered to do so, and using many of the different, you know, social platforms that are happening now as a way to, you know, bring forth cause. And I think, you know, sometimes Chicago gets a little overlooked in terms of culture when it comes to, you know, in comparison to like LA and New York City. But it's rich. It's really, really rich with culture here. So I think there's definitely a movement to help kind of catapult that. And, you know, for example, the NBA All-Star Weekend is happening this coming weekend, which is a huge deal. It's the first time it's ever been in Chicago. And you're seeing like all these different events happening and all these different collaborations happening because there's, you know, you're going to have a lot of people from out of town coming to this event. And it's really beautiful to see all these different groups, you know, trying to create and really show and embrace the Chicago culture.
That's awesome. I really love that answer.
Yeah.
It's a really good one. If someone were to visit you from out of town, what restaurant would you take them to?
Well, I would personalize the experience based on their tastes
Okay,
and allergies. But normally what I would, I guess there's a few places that I would suggest. My favorite ramen place is Wasabi, which is a couple, probably like a 10-15 minute walk from where we are now. I've got my favorite Japanese ramen here. For a really interesting like ambiance, I really like Beatnik in Westtown.
Okay.
It's got a lot, like the most plants you'll ever see in a restaurant, and it's just got these ginormous like chandeliers, and you kind of feel like you're in this Moroccan rainforest. I don't know.
Really?
It sounds opposite, but I love the ambience there. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm obsessed with fried chicken. So I would definitely suggest that if they want a good fried chicken. So the Roost is good, or honey butter fried chicken, or Crisp for Korean fried chicken wings. There's also a place called Great Seas up in Albany Park that's divine. And then maybe for brunch, I would take someone to Uncle Mike's place, which it's a staple forever. It's this Filipino breakfast joint that closes at 3 p.m. every day. And I actually was just there yesterday, taking one of my scholars out. So it's, yeah.
I did a podcast episode there.
Really?
Yeah, at Uncle
amazing.
Mike's. Yeah.
The soup is so good. You get free soup and tea with every meal. It's the best.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
You got quite a list there. That's pretty good.
I have more. I'm just kidding.
What's your hidden gem in the city?
Hidden gem. I would say it's impressive that a lot of people who are from Chicago or the Chicago burbs don't know about this place. But the Garfield Conservatory Park, it's not really hidden, but it's a lot of people who have never been, or maybe they've heard of it, or they've even heard of it. It's such a nice, tranquil escape in the city, especially like now if you think about how damn cold it is. If you want like a tropical getaway, you just go to the Garfield, and it's free, and it's beautiful. It's huge. So that I would say that would be like one of my favorite hidden gems. But then you've got other places in terms of like food and like little bars or dive bars to go to. So I would say like there's a place called 10 Cat. I believe it's on like Ashland and Irving. It's
Wait, what's it called?
10 Cat. It's like 10, like the number 10 Cat.
10 Cat.
I love it. Inside's like super vintaged out, like all the different decor and the furniture. It's like super. It reminds me of New York City a lot for some reason.
What is it? It's a bar?
Yeah, it's a bar.
Okay.
Then you got like the California Clipper in Humboldt Park, which is one of my favorite joints, and that recently got renovations probably the last couple of years. Cafe Central, which is a Puerto Rican restaurant in Westtown, is hella good. The goat stew, if you're into that. And then recently, a friend of mine, we were celebrating her going away. She was leaving the company I work for, and we stumbled into a place called Bernice's Tavern.
Nice.
And it is a little like cute little dive bar. Like
Where's
the door is stuck. You can't even get into it. You have to knock. It's kind of funny. It's in Bridgeport.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like hidden gems are all over the city, right?
Yeah.
And like
every neighborhood has a hidden gem.
100%, and I'm like still stumbling into them.
Right.
So that's like the exciting part, right? It's like that serendipitous moment when you somehow run into something, especially when a lot of these dive bars in Chicago, which I love, are these little hidden like neighborhood bars, which you wouldn't even know it's a bar.
Right.
Funny story, when I first moved here, I didn't know what Old Style beer was. I didn't know that was a beer brand. And so I was meeting some friends up at this dive bar, and they're like, "Oh yeah, where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm at Old Style." Yeah, and they were like, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a noob."
Oh man, this will be an interesting question. What sound do you most affiliate with Chicago?
It's kind of funny. I was talking about this very thing yesterday with some friends, and someone said gunshots, and I was like, that's pretty dark. For me, it's the train, the L train. So I live a couple of blocks from here, and so the train is right here. It's close enough where you can still feel it a little bit and hear it, especially when I have my windows open. But that's one of the reasons why I bought my place, is because you could see the train from the window, and you can hear it, and it's this like kind of white noise to me, where it makes me feel like I live in the middle of a city, but I'm on a really, really quiet street.
So you sought that out?
I mean, it wasn't something I sought out, but it was like one of the selling points for me, which I really like. It was something I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
It was also the 20-foot ceilings. But no, it's one of the things when anytime someone comes over to my place for the first time, it's like something that you gravitate towards, is especially at night. You can see the train just like, because the train line is parallel, and so you see this like the light of the train just moving by, and you hear it, and it goes by every like 20 minutes or every hour at night, and it's just I like it. It feels like home to me.
Wow. What music has influenced you the most during your time here?
So when I first moved here, I was listening to a lot of indie rock and indie pop. Actually, Electric Feel by MGMT was like the song of my first winter there, as I was going through my first like depression stage because I had never gone through winter, and in that winter of 2008 there was only a total of 4 days of sun. So that song got me through a lot. But moving to Chicago actually opened my eyes to house music and electronic music, which I had never really explored. And the fact that Chicago is like a music mecca. Like everyone comes through. Chicago is in the Midwest, right? A lot of artists come through and performances come through. And so it's one of the things that's actually has kept me here is the fact that you can hear some of the best and greatest artists, or even up and coming and emerging artists here as well.
What kind of music are you listening to right now? What artists?
Oh man, all the things. I don't know. I'm always listening to various things. I'm kind of ADD when it comes to music, so I don't listen to one thing. But I guess lately it's been like Fullamore, and I've been listening to a lot of like back to some old like disco house, like Chic. I don't know. It's just it's a hard question for me. Sometimes I'm like, what am I listening to? But I listen to a lot. It's like all over the place, all the time.
Yeah. I've been playing your playlist. I see you grooving. Yeah. I played it at the bar sometimes when I'm working.
Yeah.
And it's good.
You like that? You like the indie electronic stuff?
I do. What?
Yeah, and the disco house. You like disco house?
Disco house.
Disco house is what I would call it. New disco house, French house. That's like your thing.
So like, what is Miami horror considered?
It's like disco. I would say it's like disco. Like some of their earlier stuff. I haven't listened to some of the latest stuff, so but they're always changing. But I would consider it's like Australian electro pop / disco house.
It's like I want more of that, and I'm trying to find it.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to send you some then. We'll have to dig into my stuff. I think you would like L'Impératrice. They're a French.
Oh yeah, we've talked about
Yes, they're incredible. And then there's one more that I can't pull out of my head right now that's similar to, it's like 2 words. I'll have to look it up. I'm so bad with names.
Think about it.
I'm so bad with names. I will.
What's a common scene you see in your daily interaction in the city?
Traffic. I take a lot of, this is probably kind of embarrassing. I take a lot of Ubers to work because I don't want to deal with the train sometimes, or most of the time, because I'm kind of claustrophobic. Uh-huh. But I'll take like Uber pools or Vias in the morning. But it's every time I get to Ohio Street Bridge, it drives me insane because I'm just like stuck on that bridge.
Yeah.
And it's like so close to work, but like so not.
If you were given secret information that Chicago would be destroyed in 1 week, what's one quality you would choose to keep to rebuild the city?
The alleys. I think there's a lot of problems with the city, obviously, but I think one of the beautiful things that sometimes isn't apparent because of the way that, let me just be honest, it feels like a very segregated city. But I think, Chicago, again, is like really rich in culture and diversity. And I think that's a huge thing to obviously hold on to. I mean, that's what makes it such an awesome city. And I think in a rebuild, hopefully that means more integration. I would say, like, if we had to do it over again, to make these areas, more integrated. I think part of it is the gentrification of everything, and it's not just in Chicago; it's across the country. But I think it's celebrating that and doing it better. Kind of almost rewriting history a bit. Oh, the band I was thinking of to tell you, Parcells.
Okay, I've heard some of it. Okay. Some of the stuff I've listened to, like one song, of it, but not
Like the whole album through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's one small thing you would do to improve your neighborhood or the city as a whole?
So I feel like I'm kind of already doing that, or doing my part to better the community. So one of the organizations I'm involved in is called 1 Million Degrees. I've been with them for about, I think it's 5 or 6 years now. And they are a nonprofit that pairs working professionals with community college students that are trying to get their associate's degrees. So it's for highly motivated, underprivileged community college students. And they range anywhere from, right out of high school, like 18, to in their 50s. And it's such a well-run nonprofit. It's, we have monthly meetings as an entire group, and in various colleges. So I go to the one at Malcolm X. Actually, when I first started 5-6 years ago, I think there were only like 300 or 400 students, or we call them scholars, and now there are a couple thousand, I believe. And it's it's not just in one location anymore. It's all over. There's groups that meet out in the suburbs, and the community colleges out in the suburbs and things. So I really think it's a well-run organization, and you really see how mentorship, or having someone who believes in you, or who can at least think through and help coach you through life. It's not about like mentoring in the actual what they're studying, for example,
Sure.
which is something I thought when I first started. Like, my first scholar was a physics major. I'm like, I was terrible at
Can't
physics.
help you there.
Yeah. No, but it's really just being that voice, being that champion, being that cheerleader, and it makes such a difference. And you can tell sometimes by the way that they feel about themselves. One of my favorite things that they do in these monthly meetings is something called Scholarly Good News.
Okay.
And so it's a 15-minute window at the end of the 1 hour meeting, where any scholar can go up there and say something they're proud of or something good. So it could be anything from acing a test to getting accepted into a 4-year university, or just feeling good about themselves. And after every person says their piece, like the whole group is just like clapping and cheering for them, and it just
way to go.
It is such. I feel so happy and empowered, and I feel high after after these meetings, because you just feel like you're doing something good and it feels good. And then I think I already mentioned that Peach Presents, is the LGBTQ agency, and I'm really, really excited to be a part of that. Not only because I think it's an important issue, but I myself identify as a bisexual woman, and I've never explored that community here in Chicago. So it's a way for me to learn a little bit more about that and be a voice and be a part of that as well.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. When people learn you're from Chicago,
Yeah.
how do they respond, and what's your reaction?
So I get 2 general reactions.
Okay.
One is like, damn, it's cold there. Why would you do that to yourself? That happens so much. And then second general reaction is, that's awesome, because either they've been to Chicago and just be like, I love Chicago. It's such a great city, like, if they visited, or they've heard amazing things, or they understand it's an awesome culture. The culture of it really sells it. But yeah, those are my 2 general reactions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you feel overwhelmed or need a mental escape, but you can't leave the city, where do you go to clear your mind?
I think I mentioned Garfield Observatory earlier, so I'll escape there, especially in the cold winter months. But I would say I've been lucky to be able to have enough DJ gigs every week to help me, again, like I was mentioned before, it's my cathartic release. And even though like you're around a lot of people and there's a lot going on, like I completely get lost in my craft. And it's just a way for me to really meditate. It's an interesting way for me to meditate, even though it sounds really like opposite of what meditation is usually thought of. But it is mine. So yeah, it's sort of.
What's something you're curious about recently?
Man. So I think, my job, I'm over at Leo Burnett, which is a creative advertising firm. As an experienced strategist, I'm constantly having to learn about new things in terms of really learning about human nature and the context of the things that we live in. Because the whole idea is, how do we give consumers or people the best experience, in this case with brands, and how do we seamlessly do that and interweave that into their lives. So I'm always learning about, whether it's internal transformation when someone if someone's trying to quit alcohol, or they're trying to work out, or they've maybe gotten out of a bad breakup. What does that look like from a psychological and a scientific level?
Okay.
Or recently, working on a pitch where I started digging deep into survivalism and survivalist culture.
Really?
Yes. And I've always been a huge fan of the zombie apocalypses, and I used to read a bunch of books and things like that about that. But it's really interesting how that has evolved over the last 60, 70 years. Learning that in the 60s and 70s there was a huge uprising of survivalism because of the Cold War and the political climate during that time. And then you see another resurgence of that during the Obama re-election, where a lot of the conservatives in the country, got scared of the shit's hitting the fan, and so they start something called the Read Out movement started, where the
What's it called?
The Read Out.
Read out?
Read out.
Read out.
Yeah,
Okay.
Read Out movement, where the conservative Christians and Jewish folks, whether it's anywhere from the country, but a lot of them from Southern California, moved up to the rural Pacific Northwest in the inner west mountain regions, which is where Idaho, part of Colorado, Nevada area.
Oh, I hear Boise has experienced a population surge.
Yes.
Is that why?
I think that's part of it. Yeah. So people are moving there as a way to escape.
Thank you.
In fear. It's all based on fear. And then you've got now with Trump election, then you've got people being woke, if you will, and then there's this whole fear from the 1% that everyone else is going to overthrow and all that. A
lot of fear going around.
Yeah, there's a great New York Times article about this called, I think it's called "Doomsday for the Filthy Rich." And it's a great article if you get a chance to read it. But it really talks about how, this 1%, they're starting to, buy islands off of the Pacific Northwest, or New Zealand's a really hot area where they're buying property where they can go escape, basically. But it's interesting, all these different, it's almost like with the 1% too, it's almost this anonymous, they don't really talk about it openly, but they talk about it amongst each other.
Uh-huh.
But it's really interesting to see just the human migration and the context of what fear can do and in different groups. And they say, and National Geographic actually did a study where they said 49% of Americans would rather spend the money on, GTFO than in their 401ks. So it's kind of crazy. And
wow, it's so fascinating.
Yeah,
Huh. So you can see patterns of human thoughts communicate themselves into actions, and you can see what actions are going on in the country. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Within the past 5 years of living here, what personal realization has improved your outlook on life the most?
So there's a couple of things. A couple of years ago, I was going through one of my longest relationship breakups. It was a really hard and it was a bad breakup. But in that, the personal realizations and understanding that you really can't control everything. Because I tend to I'm kind of type A, so I put my heart and soul into things. I'm a perfectionist. And so, in that realization, it doesn't matter how hard you try or how perfect you try to be. Sometimes things are out of your control, and you have to just roll with the punches. But you have to also be positive about it and look at it as a learning experience, and not hold resentment and be angry at people or for things, because there's context for everything. And you just have to really have to have empathy. No matter, if some people are the way they are, then that's the way they are. You empathize with it. You see if it's good for you and what you want in life, and then you move on if it's not. So I think being able to turn all bad things into a positive thing was kind of my learning, and it's what I try to do with all my experiences. Try to see the good in everything, and I would consider myself quite an optimist when it comes to that. And the second thing was a concept called Ikigai. It's
What is it?
Ikigai.
Okay.
It's Ikigai, It's a Japanese word that means reason for being, your purpose in life. So when I was transitioning into my 30s a few years ago, I was feeling a bit empty with my purpose, right? I had a good job, I was making good money, I was good at what I was doing. I was kind of just rolling along. But what I was kind of feeling empty about was, what am I doing for the world? How am I making it better? I just felt like I was just part of this system that's just like to survive and to make, to provide a life for myself. But I wanted more. I wanted to give back. I wanted to somehow find a way to weave what I was doing in making the world a better place versus like making brands and making, corporations more money, right? So I think that's when like DJing actually came into my life serendipitously, and I started realizing a sense of purpose there in that, being a woman, especially a woman of color, and in an industry where there's not enough of us, and the way that I saw it impact other people, whether it was a 5-year-old girl or an 80-year-old woman or man, that I was on the right path for that. And then somehow in the last couple years, all of that has started to interweave from my work, as an experienced strategist. Part of what I do is a lot of cultural research. But part of it is like what makes the bridge so great is that I'm not only just talking about culture, I'm living it, I'm moving it, I'm doing it, I'm a maker like in the space. And so it makes my work even richer and even better. Richer, get it? So I feel more fulfilled that way. And then also getting a hand in all these different communities and community uplifting has also filled that void. So going back to Ikigai, it's a 4-part Venn diagram, if you will, and it's great. And the 4 circles are what you can get paid for, what you're good at, what you love doing, and what the world needs. And I think the hardest part to achieve is that what the world needs.
So is the Ikigai
is the center of all of it. Yeah.
So repeat that again. So it's what you can get paid for, what you love doing, what the world needs.
And what you're good at.
What you're good at.
Yeah. And so, like, it's hard to reach that middle Ikigai, but I honestly, like, if I were to be honest with myself, I feel like I've reached it, and I just don't know how long that's going to last, so I'm kind of just, like, doing as much as I can and just, like, being present, and because, I may not be DJing in 2 years for some reason or whatever, and, or, something may, I don't know, something may happen where I'm feeling a little empty in certain areas, but right now I feel like that's where I'm at, and I encourage anyone to really look at that map and like really map it out yourself and see what you're missing if you are missing anything. Like for example, say you're good at something and you can get paid for it, but you're missing the other 2, then those 2 combined is your profession, or like what you love overlapped with what the world needs. That's your mission. So you can see like the different areas where,
It's cool.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because I think a lot of what we talk about when we say self-care and self-love and all this stuff is really just finding intention and purpose in our lives so that we can feel like we're not in this like plug and chug sort of like life where it's just like just the day and day, here's a routine, this is every day is blah blah blah. It's finding a sense of something higher.
So then this last question I have for you.
Yeah.
What's something you're excited or dream about doing within the next 5 years?
So I know we talked a lot about Chicago. I mean, this whole segment is about Chicago and my relationship with it. But I recently was in New York. I'm actually in New York every 6 to 8 weeks for work, but mainly to escape. And some of my favorite people are in New York, and actually going back to when you were saying the question was if you couldn't escape the city. But when I can escape the city, I like to go to New York. Okay. and I've been in love with it for a long time, and I decided when I came back from my last trip a few weeks ago that I want to make the transition. I think I'm ready to leave Chicago and conquer New York. Well, not conquer.
We're gonna be sad to see you leave.
No, but it's not going to be like, hey, I'm leaving in a month.
Right.
It's gonna, I'm still working some cards here, and there's some things I want to see through to a certain point here before I fly.
Fly your wings.
Fly.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having this conversation with me. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I feel like this is a very rich conversation.
Very enriching indeed. Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Again, you can follow Justina at Soup Space. Have a sensational day.